You are listening to Two Tone Uncensored. I am your host, Ryan Moreland. Very excited about this show tonight. On with me, a favorite of this show, Titans insider, and all-around good guy, Greg Arias. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing great, Ryan. Thanks for the invitation tonight. Hope everybody out there listening is having a great night as well.
All right. We got a lot to cover, so we're going to jump right into it, Greg. First thing, got some questions for you. First one, how impressed are you with Byard, and not just in this last game where he had 3 picks, but so far this season?
Very impressed, and I have really been impressed with the kid since he was drafted. Of course, him being a local here and, playing college at MTSU about 30 miles down the road, I had the opportunity to see him play live a couple of times in college, and you heard a lot about him when you'd watch the highlights and stuff on the local television because MTSU certainly gets coverage in the Nashville media and market. So impressed from the start with him, and I really think that it's finally starting to pay off. There's that rookie learning curve coming in. He had the physical ability. He had the mental ability. He just had to learn and get comfortable, and we're starting to see him do that and become a leader on this defense, and it's a good thing, certainly, for the Titans. They need a few more of those in some spots, but nothing that I didn't expect from this guy at this point in time, and I think he's only going to get better.
I'd 100% agree with that. Moving on to probably the only other player that was really impressive in this last game, talking about Ryan Succop. Where would you rank right now Succop among Titans kickers all time?
Oh, that's a tough question. I don't know because I don't want to short and leave anybody out. Certainly Al Del Greco had a good run here, when he was in his prime with the Titans. Obviously, Rob Baronis was really good. Those three are the top three, and I know that's probably a cop-out because they've been here the longest amount of time because, you had some other guys, Gary Anderson, that filled in a little bit here and there. So I don't know. As far as the NFL record, certainly he's got the one for the most consecutive made field goals inside of 40 yards, and I think he'll add to that probably some more as the season goes on this year before, he'll eventually obviously miss one at some point in time. But you might have to put him at the top because of that. But certainly those three guys have all been very good and done a lot of things and won some games, for the Titans over their career.
Absolutely. I'd agree. It's a position, since we've come to Nashville, since we've come to Tennessee, it's a position that we've had a lot of luck with. We've had 3 really good kickers. And like you mentioned, we've had guys that come in for short periods of times, but we've had 3 kickers that had longevity in their careers and were very good for a long time over their careers. So we've been lucky in that aspect.
Absolutely. And, I don't think Succop's anywhere near the end of his run. He's lost a little bit, on the accuracy of the long kicks. He did miss at 54 yesterday. It had the distance. It was just wide. And who knows, weather could play a factor in that. Cleveland obviously has some weather issues and wind issues and things. So, did that affect the kick at all? But I think he's still got some more good football left in him. He's a really nice guy. I had an opportunity to speak with him after the Colts game last week, and just a very humble, nice gentleman and one of the good guys. And you don't hear a lot about him because he's a kicker, and the TVs and radio crews don't do a whole lot of features on kickers.
That's definitely true. Moving on to the next one here, Greg. So far this season, and this carried over a little bit from last year, but it's definitely been in place all of this year. We've had a lot of trouble coming out and scoring in the first half. Our offense seems to never get traction until after halftime. What do you think's the most to blame for this?
That's a good question. Obviously, I think some of it has been Marcus's injury. He was limited a little bit against Indianapolis, and I think he kind of felt his way through that first half. He was tentative about what he was doing and how he was doing it, making sure that he didn't re-injure himself, and that's certainly understandable. I'm not sure why he kind of maybe was that way yesterday, the fact that he knew he wasn't full speed and couldn't get out and run. And then, of course, you go back to Miami and Matt Castle And, you kind of throw that one out the window for what it is. Nothing against Matt Castle, but he's just not a very mobile quarterback and only got the one real week of work with the starters to try to step in and play. It's hard to put your finger on it. I think the offensive line probably is not as good as they were coming in, and I think it's more to do with the interior of that line than it is really the tackles. I think Taylor Lewan's playing at a pretty high level. Conklin has had some moments where he's had some rookie-ish looks to him. One of those yesterday where he gave up a sack and, had a guy just jolt and knock him backwards. But for the most part, he's played fairly well. I think for whatever reason, the interior three are having some struggles that they need to figure it out, or perhaps the Titans might need to think about addressing it, because when you look at it, you paid big money for Ben Jones to come in. He's been pretty good. You got Josh Klein that came in as in free agency, and you got Quentin Spain that was an undrafted guy. That doesn't mean that they're not quality football players, but I think certainly you can improve those positions.
No, I'd agree with that, and it does seem like the running game always picks up in the second half. One thing I've thought, and I want to see how much you think, it seems like our play calling also gets better as the game wears on. And my thought, it could be, is our coaches are better at reacting to a game plan than they are at building a game plan heading into a game. Do you think that holds any credence, or do you think it's not the case?
It could, but if you look at yesterday, I don't know that the play calling got any better in the second half than it did in the first. And, when you look at these things, and I'm not trying to disparage any of the coaches or talk negative about them, they're all, at least to me, they've been very cordial, friendly, professional. I've got nothing bad to say about them personally, nor would I anyway. If I did, I would simply avoid it. But I think they're all good people. I just at times think that this exotic smash mouth, perhaps they're trying to do a few too many things and maybe not doing some things as well as they could if it weren't, so many irons in the fire, so to speak. And I don't know that they're getting the most out of all of their weapons. Now, one of the reasons I think probably the passing game is struggling a little bit is that they don't necessarily have the true deep threat again this year. I think Taywan Taylor is a guy that can get deep. We saw that against Indianapolis. They've not really used him a lot in that capacity. That was supposed to be the role for Corey Davis, and, of course, he's been out injured. So with them not having the, quote, deep threat, or not doing a lot of, throwing Taylor the deep ball, they've tried to use Delaney Walker down the field. That's limiting them a little bit because defenses are able to roll up and make it a little bit tougher on some of the short passing game. I am curious why they didn't take more shots down the middle of the field yesterday to both Delaney Walker and to Jonnu Smith, who can catch the football, because coming in, Cleveland struggled in that defensively, and the Titans really didn't exploit it. So yesterday just really wasn't a very good game plan overall to me from start to finish.
Yeah, I'd agree with that statement a lot. It was a pretty rough game to watch as a Titans fan. It's the ugliest win we've had in a while. But, right now, going into our bye week this week, setting at 4-3, it's not exactly where I think a lot of us thought going into the year we would be. How disappointed are you with the first half of the season for the Titans?
Well, let me go back and say one thing about the last point that I made, because I probably should have said this. But, the players didn't execute, too. It's not all on the coaches. The players have to go out and make plays, and a lot of it they didn't do yesterday. So while the coaching and the game plan might have been a little off, certain players contributed. As far as for disappointment, I'm not really disappointed because, as a media guy, it makes my job easier when they win, obviously. Fans are happier, players are happier. They're more ready to talk to you when you come in the locker room after a win than they are, when the team is 3-13 and you've asked the same question about 13 losses. They get tired of answering it. We get tired of asking it. So it makes it much better, but I really didn't have an expectation for this team because, coming in, every team's different, and you can tell that from the offensive line because last year it was considered one of the best in football. It's still decent. It's not been terrible. Certainly pass protection, if you look at the numbers from PFF, it's pretty good. They're just not running the ball as well. I'm not sure what the issue is. So it's hard for me to put an expectation on a team and say, they're going to be this or they're going to be that based on what they did a year ago.
Fair enough, Greg. My next off of that question is, it feels to me like this was a great time for a bye week. You know, we were struggling a little bit. Marcus comes back. We win 2, in which I felt like we could have played better in both of those games, except for the fourth quarter. We played excellent in the fourth quarter of the Colts game, but besides that quarter, you know, there was 7 other quarters where I thought we could have played a lot better. To me, it felt like it was a really good time for a bye week for us to get us, you know, everybody healthy, everybody's mind, you know, refocused. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. You know, and the key thing is to get Marcus healthy. You know, obviously, I haven't heard a report today on Delaney Walker. We hopefully will get some more update on that. You know, what exactly his status is. You need to get DeMarco Murray healthy too, but Marcus obviously is the key to that. And the bye week comes at a pretty good time. And personally, I think that the NFL ought to put the bye weeks at week 8 and 9. Half the league have a bye in week 8, the other half in week 9, so everybody gets it right in the middle of the season, and not have teams getting byes in week 2 and week 3 and then having to turn around and play 13 or 14 straight. You could split it up, do it 8 and 9, and everybody's right there pretty close together in the middle and make things more fair. I wish they'd do that, but obviously I'm not in charge of such matters. But it's a good time for the Titans.
I think that's a pretty good idea, too. Speaking of, you know, coming back from injuries, Corey Davis this week missed his 5th consecutive game. What are we looking at now? Do you think he's going to be ready for this Ravens game in week 9?
It's a possibility, but how ready can the guy be? I mean, you could get him in some spot play, but he's out of shape, obviously, or at least football shape, where he hasn't been playing, he hasn't been working, you know, he hasn't had any hits, and so how much are you going to want to put this guy out there and you know, risk him going and trying to help you? I think you could do it in some certain situations if he's ready to go, but he's not going to be a dramatic help to the team the way they had certainly thought about him being coming into the season, simply because he's missed so much time at this point.
That's a great point. And speaking of Marcus and his health, you know, this is the 3rd straight year with injury problems. Do you think for the rest of the year we see the coaching staff pull back on the running plays, or do you think when he's at 100% we go right back to it?
I think they're going to use him some, because you kind of have to, because that is such a strength of his game. And, you know, I was kind of surprised yesterday, because I actually thought that the Colts game and the injury in that sense might have been good for him, because it forced him to stand in the pocket and be a pocket quarterback against the Colts. Now, I know they're not the 85 Bears defense, but they're still an NFL defense, and he still had to stand in there and make reads, deliver the football, and do what he needed to do. So I thought that helped him, certainly late in the game, as I said earlier, after he got comfortable with the leg a little bit and played much better. I looked for him to come out and have a good game yesterday, and he didn't really do that. So, you know, it kind of makes me wonder, you know, what exactly is going on. Is the injury a little bit worse than maybe we thought? It's causing him more problems than, you know, than what initially we thought it was going to be? Or was it just one of those games and it was more of an anomaly?
2 quick questions here about the season so far. What do you think is the biggest surprise so far for you in this Titans season? And what do you think has been your biggest letdown so far in this season?
Biggest surprise? Good question. The surprise, I guess, would be the offensive line. Now, this may go hand in hand with your question about letdown, but, you know, everybody thought coming in that would be the ultimate strength of this team, regardless of Marcus or anything else, would be the offensive line. And I'm surprised that it hasn't really been as good as we thought it would be, certainly in the run game. They've been pretty good in pass protection, but, you know, they're not churning out the yards. And I know DeMarco Murray has been hurt. Derrick Henry hadn't been hurt. He's not, other than the Colts game, and a lot of that was on the one long run at the end of the thing. But, you know, that, I guess that's a surprise to me. Disappointment, Eric Decker a little bit. And I don't know that it's all Eric Decker's fault. I really thought this guy was going to come in and be a red zone presence. It's not really turned out that way. He had a pretty good game against the Colts, but he was on a milk carton yesterday. So, you know, and I think maybe some of that has to do with the fact that Corey Davis is not there, or they're not getting the deep shots down the field that stretches the defense, that makes him a bigger part of the offense, between the 20s, and then certainly even more so when he gets into the red zone.
On a milk carton. I like that line, Greg. That's a good one. But you're looking at this division right now. The Houston just had their bye. They're sitting at 3-3. We're tied with the Jags, although we have the tiebreaker right now at 4-3, and the Colts bringing up the rear. What team in the AFC South, and it's obviously right now between the Jags and the Texans, which one worries you the most for the rest of the season?
It's a good question, because when you look at it, the Texans have got a very stout defense, though they lost Merciless and J.J. Watt. They've been able to cover that up just a little bit. This Jags defense looks really, really, really good. They're playing great football, but they still have Blake Bortles at quarterback. I'm going to say Jacksonville, even though I know the Titans went down there and got a win, in Jacksonville. Blake Bortles didn't really have a great game in that game, and he's scattered about as far as he'll have a great game and look like Joe Montana, and then you have a game and look like, Chuck Roast. He's just all over the place. So if he comes into Nashville when the Jaguars come here with that defense and what they're capable of doing and has a good game, the Titans could lose that one at home when a lot of people think they probably should win it. And, of course, you're in a good spot now, because you're going to have both Houston and Jacksonville coming in here. You do have a trip to Indy. And if Andrew Luck is out of that game, I think the Titans can sweep them in that. But you've got to come in here and you've got to get those games at home and win both of them if you're going to win this division. And that's going to be a tall order, because both those are pretty good teams. And I really like Deshaun Watson as a quarterback right now. I think he and Houston are probably the most complete team in the division, even though I think I like the Jacksonville defense better than I like Houston's at this point in time.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. And Jacksonville and Tennessee seem like no matter how good one team is or how bad the other is, it seems like we always split the season series, especially in the last handful of years. It seems like we always split that season series.
Indeed. And, of course, last year, the Titans had an opportunity to go to the playoffs and went to Jacksonville and not only lost the game, but Marcus had the broken leg down there. So I think he got the mental part out of the way with that, going in there and getting the win when they went down and won that game. But they've just got to come home and hold serve if they're going to have a chance, because you can beat the Colts and sweep them, but if you lose two to Houston and one to the Jaguars, you're going to find yourself, 3-3 in the division, and certainly you're behind Houston then, depending on what they do the rest of the way. And this is a division in the AFC South that's going to get the AFC South champion in, but probably not a wild card team after that, unless the Titans can make up some ground, and that includes winning some games that they're not maybe supposed to win, or, winning other games. Obviously, Baltimore coming up is going to be a big one. They've got to get that game because it's at home.
I agree with you there, and we just talked about this AFC South. Going into the season, a lot of members of the media, I think the vast majority of people were picking this Titans team to win the division. Looking at it now, we're still sitting in first. Do you think that the Titans still have the AFC South? It's theirs to lose. Would you say that?
No, I wouldn't say it's theirs to lose. I think it's theirs to win. Because, as I said, I think Jacksonville's defense is better. I think Houston is better overall. The Titans' offense, I think, can play and match up if it's just offense versus offense. I think they're potentially, if the offensive line figures things out, to be as good as the Texans' offense. But I still have some serious questions about the Titans' defense. So it's not theirs to lose, it's theirs to win. But they've got to go out and certainly play a lot better than they have the last 3 weeks, with the exception of the fourth quarter against Indianapolis.
Well put, Greg. It's not ours to lose, but it's ours to win. I like that. Let's head into this Browns game we were just talking about, recapping this Browns game. We get the win in overtime, 12-9. Not a single touchdown in this game for either team. The turnovers went in our favor in this, as we were talking about Byard with 3 picks. We definitely won the turnover battle. It seemed like we played, pretty well on defense, all things considered, holding them to just, 3 field goals throughout the game. But our offense was stagnant pretty much from start to finish, especially when it seemed like we'd get drives started and then we'd get into field goal range and things would just shut down completely for us. What did you notice from this game? What did you take away?
Well, I'll go back and touch on one thing from a Cleveland standpoint, because after Joe Thomas, who is a great NFL player, he's a future Hall of Famer, but when he went out of the game, you noticed immediately Brian Arakpo really took off with the pressure, and the Titans were able to exploit Drango, the guy that came in to replace him there at left tackle. If Joe Thomas stays in that game, I don't know that we find the same outcome with the Titans winning the ball game. It's part of it. But I think that was a probably overlooked key to the game for the Titans, because Thomas wasn't allowing much. They were doing a pretty good job for the most part of shutting he and Derek Morgan out as far as sacks go. And if you remember last year, Cody Kessler came into Nashville and threw for 343. So when he came into the game, I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. And he came in and started moving the football, but the Titans defense was able to do enough. And obviously Byard with an interception there of him as well kind of shut things down, in that standpoint. But it certainly was a moment of concern when he came into the ball game. And again, with Joe Thomas going out, I think that was a huge difference.
Absolutely. Going into this game, one thing I was concerned about was how good this rush defense for Cleveland has been this year. Going into the game, they were tied for first for yards allowed per carry with the Denver Broncos. They've played some decent teams. I believe it was 4 of the top 11 rushing attacks in the NFL they have played. They held us as a team to just 2.5 yards per carry on 32 carries. Obviously a huge part of why we were so stagnant is we couldn't get the rush game going against them.
Well, that's true, and you got to give a lot of credit to Greg Williams, who's a guy that we know and I know personally, from his time here with the Titans. He's an outstanding defensive coordinator. He is putting his guys in the position to be successful, and they've got some talent. They're not, the greatest defensive team of all times by any stretch of the imagination, but they've got some talented guys. Myles Garrett's coming on and giving them some things as a pass rusher. So I thought Taylor Lewan did a pretty good job against him yesterday, neutralizing him. But Greg Williams is a smart coach, and he took the film and went through the tendencies that the Titans have shown and was able to put together a plan, and his players went out and played hard, because even though they're winless on the season, they're still prideful, and they're looking to say, hey, we're going to finally beat somebody. We're not going 0-16. And so they're playing their hardest and their hearts out right now to try to avoid that 0-16 thing. And, that makes them a dangerous football team. Now, they're not going to get into the playoffs and, do any damage there, but somebody's going to get beat by that bunch when they come out and, like the Titans yesterday, luckily survived not having your A game against a team that really played perhaps their best football game of the season so far yesterday.
Absolutely, and early on in the year, they gave the Steelers a scare. They've had some pretty close games this year. They do have some talent. But moving on to the other side of the foot, we've talked about this offense. The rushing game wasn't working. Marcus didn't play that well, and we were stagnant. On defense, though, we allowed 2.5 yards per carry. 3 interceptions with no passing touchdowns. Short averages, only 2 sacks in this game, but, all in all, not a bad game for us defensively.
No, it wasn't. There were some times where I thought that obviously Duke Johnson is a talented player. He was able to do some things and keep some drives going and move the chains a few times on some plays where you're thinking, why in the world would they not think and that guy's going to get the football either out of the backfield or on draw plays. But for the most part, the defense played a solid game. I think there's obviously still some room for improvement there. Jonathan Cyprien, who was brought in as a free agent at safety to be the run stopper, a guy that can come downhill and do some things there, with Byard being the ball hawk guy on the backside. Having Cyprien out kind of hurts some of that a little bit. Denoris Searcy is not a bad player, but he's not the best run stopper and he's not the best cover guy. He's a solid player, but he's not spectacular in either one of those 2 areas. So you kind of lose a little bit there. They can get better back there. They did enough to hang on and win yesterday and made plays when they had to. But like I said a little earlier, if I'm ranking defenses in the AFC South, I'm going Jacksonville, Houston, the Titans, and the Colts in that order. So certainly some room to get better there for the defense, and they've got to figure out a way to get more pass rush because they're not getting enough of it right now to be as effective as they could be. With Morgan and Rakpo being lead guys, Casey's been kind of shut down a little bit at times. He's getting double teamed. Walden hadn't really brought a lot, and Kevin Dodd is on a milk carton.
No, I would 100% agree with everything that you said there. Pass rush has been a big problem for us this entire season, and it has been. We're not getting very many sacks. We're not getting to the quarterback fast enough. Another thing, and we've talked about it on the show throughout the season, is tackling, the first man up, first man that gets to the play in open field has been a big issue for us. We didn't do a terrible job. Duke Johnson gave us some headaches for sure in this game. But compared to what we've done for most of the season, it wasn't terrible. But it seems to be an issue of getting the guy down, the first person to get there making the tackle, except for a handful of guys like Bayard, has been a very sure tackler this year. Woodyard's been playing pretty well. And obviously, if you get in Casey's clutch, you're going down. But outside of that, we've had issues tackling for sure in the open field.
Absolutely. And again, that's part of the reason why I say, I rank the Titans third in the AFC South as far as defenses, because that's extra yardage. And, it may not hurt you on this particular drive or that particular drive, but eventually it's going to hurt you. Missing tackles is going to keep a drive alive that could be the potential difference in a team, completing a drive and a touchdown and winning a game or losing a game. So that's certainly something that has got to get better from that standpoint.
I agree. One more question, Greg, before I'll let you go here. What do you think is going through, in the locker room through practices during this bye week? What do you think is some things that the Titans are really going to work on coming up on this Week 9 game?
Well, one of the things that people don't realize is, yes, there's a bye week, but the players actually get time off during that, so they won't be practicing during that week. They'll have a 5-day break, I believe, in that they actually have time to get away, go back to home, wherever that may be, do, vacation, whatever it is they want to do, and come back. The biggest thing that they need to work on are the things that really we've talked about, and I think that's what they'll do when they get back to practice and start preparing for the next game. But it's really getting healthy, because you need to get DeMarco back. Hopefully Delaney Walker's not too serious and you can get him up and going, but basically get Marcus back healthy. And then you mentioned it too, Corey Davis. Can he be ready? Because certainly I think he can give you a little something, but you got to get the guy back on the field and you got to get him some work, because if he misses the entire season at this point in time, he's a rookie next year coming back in for his second year. So hopefully they can get him out there. That's really the biggest thing is the health of the team. Get them healthy and, then see if you can put all the pieces together and make it work the way you thought it was going to be when this team was assembled and when you came into training camp.
I agree there, Greg. And for anybody that's out there that doesn't know where to find you and where to read your articles and stuff, and if you're not, you really should be. Greg's an amazing writer. Where do they find you, Greg?
Pro Football Spot. Just look that up. And, of course, you can go on Twitter, Greg Arias PFS, and you can find links to stuff on there. And I appreciate it and love what I do. I'm really blessed to have been in the position at the right place and time to be able to get into this and to cover the Titans in the NFL. And I appreciate guys like you that do so much great stuff that allow me to come on and talk about the Titans and kind of share, what I see and hear and go through with going to practices and things and being around the team. It's really, again, it's a blessing, and I appreciate what you guys do, and thanks for having me on.
Greg, I'm going to tell you the pleasure is all mine. I love having you on. You always bring some great insight, bring great knowledge to this show. Always a pleasure having you on. I can't wait until the next time it happens.
Absolutely. Just give me a call, and thanks for having me. Have a great night.
You too. Another big thanks to Greg Arias for coming on the show. Always love having him on. Real quick before we get out of here, just going to go through a few of your mailbag questions. First one is not one that I got from one person, but a bunch of people, and something that has been heavily followed in the news. So obviously, Marshawn Lynch suspended one game and kicked out of the game for putting his hands on a referee. And I've been asked this because we've seen Taylor Lewan put his hands on a ref before. We've seen other players do it. So this is a question of, did he deserve it? Should it have happened? I think yes. I think that the key difference is between, Taylor Lewan, let's say, when he has put his hands on a ref and when Marshawn Lynch did it, is the way it looks. And it really, that shouldn't matter as much. I think you put your hands on a referee or official at all, it should be an automatic ejection without, incidental contact or, shaking his hand or something like that. Obviously, that's not a problem. But anytime that you grab a referee, you're reaching over a referee to grab a guy and you hit a referee, automatic, you should be out of the game. Officials have to be protected in this game. As many of you who listen to the show probably already know, I have some history in officiating football at the high school level. If someone like Marshawn Lynch grabbed me, and obviously there's no one in high school like Marshawn Lynch, but if someone was that size and they grabbed me and came at me the same way that Marshawn Lynch did, it would be intimidating. It would be, to me, I would see it as him trying to come at me, him trying to intimidate me, him trying to scare me, or him trying to physically attack me. I would see it like that, and I think anybody in their right mind would. The way he went into it, maybe not so much the contact, but the way he went into it seemed malicious. And now I don't think it exactly was, but the way it looks was damning for Marshawn Lynch. I think that's why he's going to end up with the suspension. That's why he got kicked out of that game. It's not so much, was it malicious? Was his intent to be malicious? As much as it looked bad. It looked like he was going to attack that official. So that's something, it sucks. That's the way it's going to work, though. If it looks bad, it's going to be called as bad. But I have no problem with the suspension. I have no problem with him getting kicked out of the game because you shouldn't put your hands on an official for any reason whatsoever. I firmly stand by that. I would be upset to see one of our players, get thrown out of a game, obviously, or get suspended, especially, the big comparisons, Taylor Lewan. A guy like that, you're a star left tackle, a guy that means a lot to your football team. It would suck, but I would understand it if he was tossed out. For some of the times that he has put his hands on a referee, one, definitely comes to mind. I think we're all thinking the same incident. If you do that, I don't have a problem with him getting suspended for that. It would suck. I obviously want him on the field as much as possible. He's a great player. But I don't have a problem with him being suspended for doing that. You can't put your hands on a referee. End of discussion. The next thing that we have to go over is something that I got from a lot of people, and that is what do we expect of Corey Davis? Will he be back for the Ravens game? Something that me and Greg talked about earlier tonight. The Titans said that they expect him to be at practice Monday, November 5th, and they expect him to play in the game against the Ravens. So that's the latest. We'll see if that actually happens or not. But right now, the latest is Corey Davis should be active for a Week 9 matchup. The last question in the mailbag this week, sent in by a good friend of mine, Michael Bennett. He asked me, what do the Titans need to focus on in the draft and the offseason? What three positions come to mind? The first one for me is obvious. I think the first one has to be pass rushing, defensive end. A 3-4 defensive tackle, defensive end that can get after the quarterback. It's absolutely vitally important for us. That's number one. Number two for me, I think after that, is focusing on that offensive line, the interior of the offensive line. Getting a guard, I think, in the second and third round, pretty high for a guard. And I know that might leave a bad taste in some Titans fans' mouth when you think about Chance Warmack, who really didn't work out for us. But we need a guy that can come in and rotate. I don't think Josh Klein's the answer at right tackle. Even though he's played decently well, I think we can upgrade big time at that position and upgrade cheaper if we're able to get him in the second and third round. I think Quentin Spain's a heck of a football player. I've said it before on the show. I think he's outstanding, but I don't think he's the long-term answer either in that spot, or at least I don't think so right now. I think we can improve there. The last one for me, and I think it's almost as obvious as needing a pass rusher on that defensive line, is getting a competent backup quarterback that when Marcus goes down, we bring in Matt Castle, we're going to lose football games. And I know everybody will bring up that game against Houston last year in Week 17, but Houston didn't need that win. That doesn't count as a win for Matt Castle. They didn't need that win. They weren't playing for a win. They were just, they had to show up, put a team on the field so they could play in the playoffs next week. That was the only reason that they even showed up to that game, is you have to. Now, if you look at all of his other games, Matt Castle loses. Matt Castle loses football games. That's what happens. We need someone that can come in, and when Marcus goes down or if Marcus misses time, we're not over. Our season's not over. We can compete. We can still be a very competitive football team. A guy like Matt Moore, who's been a solid backup in Miami for years, is a good example. There's plenty of guys out there in the league that are great examples of solid backup quarterbacks that aren't going to take over football games, but don't necessarily mean you're going to lose a football game. Matt Castle should have been able to get a win against Miami. Miami's offense is the second worst scoring offense in football, only beating out the Browns. That's a game we should have been able to win. I don't think that just because Marcus should go out, we should end up losing football games. Now, the question becomes, do you do it through the draft? Do you do it through free agency and try to get a veteran? I like the method, especially right now in Marcus's career, of bringing in a veteran, getting another guy that knows what he's doing. But obviously that depends on who hits the market and who's available, because you want a guy that can come in and be better than Matt Castle, but also can provide that kind of leadership, because Marcus is still pretty early in his career. Now, later in his career, when we no longer need this veteran, I think you bring in a young guy, obviously, that Marcus can teach, that he can learn from Marcus and be a backup. I think that's the way you should do it when you have a franchise quarterback. You have a veteran presence there that he can learn from, that he can learn how to be a great leader, how to be a better passer, how to, different things like that. And then you bring in the guy that's up next is the perfect scenario. So you have a situation in which, you have Aaron Rodgers sitting on the bench behind Brett Favre. That worked out amazingly well for the Packers. We need to do that. So I think we still go veteran here. Marcus is going to be heading into his fourth season next year. Technically, that makes him a veteran, but still pretty early in a very young career. He's starting to head towards that prime. I think you still want a guy that he can learn from rather than a guy that he needs to teach at this point. I say you go in free agency. Obviously, like I said, that depends on who's available, who is there for us to grab. Is there someone there that's going to be, 1, better than Matt Castle, 2, a veteran, and 3, worth the price that we're going to have to pay for him. I think there's going to be guys out there. It seems like there is every single year. You don't need a guy that's going to set the world on fire, but a guy that's competent, knows how to run, his system, especially a guy that fits in our system. Because Matt Castle is the furthest thing from fitting in our offense. He's slow, doesn't make fast reads, and just throws the long ball. We have a fast quarterback that excels in accuracy in the short and mid-range game. He's completely the opposite of Marcus Mariota. So I'd like to find a guy that could come in and be, like Marcus. A guy that I really liked in the draft last year, Nathan Peterman, who's, playing in Buffalo. I really like the way that he matched up with Marcus. As a guy I would hope that we were going to target. I still think we had a good draft, but it was a guy that I thought we could target later in the draft and get, because he does. He doesn't have the best long ball, but he excels in the short and middle range passing game. He's very accurate. He's more mobile than you think, but he's not a guy that's going to set the world on fire with his legs for sure, like Marcus is. But I thought it would be an excellent backup for us, and a route that I wouldn't mind taking, but I think getting a veteran's a better route for us. And we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But those 3 positions, a pass rusher along the defensive line that can help this pretty stagnant pass rush, a backup quarterback for Marcus, and an interior lineman, a guard that can come in. And I think they'll play backup for a little bit, but eventually take Josh Klein's role. I think would help our offensive line out. We have a very good offensive line, even though we've had our struggles this year, but it never hurts to upgrade an already great position, so that way, it's one of the best in the league. We go back to being one of the best in the league, because we were last year one of the best offensive lines, bar none, in football. This year, though, I think we're back towards 10 now at this point. You would have to be honest. I don't think we're a top 3 offensive line for sure right now in the league. So to get back to that, I think you need to bring in some guys that can, just upgrade a little bit over that position. I think it'd be I don't think it would be hard. I'll put it that way. I don't think it would be hard to upgrade over Josh Klein in the draft if you get him in round 2 or 3. But I'm going to make that a poll question on Twitter this week. I'll ask your guys your thoughts about what positions you think we need to focus on this off season, and then we'll see what the results are at the start of next week's show. Going to start using that Twitter more often to get engaged with you guys. Again, like always, you can find us on that Twitter at TTU Podcast. You can find us on Facebook at TTU Podcast. You can find our website, www.ttupodcast.com. And email me. You can email me at twotoneuncensored@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We always love getting feedback from fans. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I hope everybody has a great bye week this week and a great Halloween. And get recharged like the team is going to. Get ready, come back so we can kick some Raven ass in week 9. Tighten up.